Lin Jing rubbed her sore eyes, and the code lines on the computer screen began to blur into a group. He glanced at the time in the lower right corner. It was common for him to work overtime to get to this point at 2.5 hours in the morning. As an ordinary programmer, his life is to repair bugs and deadlines without any effort, and occasionally he has to deal with the boss's needs. The office was empty-minded, and only the low buzzing sound of the air was accompanying him. He sighed and was about to save the file to get off work, but suddenly he felt dizzy. "Damn, are you low blood sugar again?" He murmured in a low voice, reaching out to touch the energy drink on the table, but his fingers didn't touch the bottle, and the whole world suddenly went black. It's not the darkness of the eyes, but it's like someone directly pulling out the power supply, exploring, listening, and touching, and all the senses are instantly cut off. He didn't even feel as if he was thrown into a bottomless and purplish body, and he was uncontrollably slamming down. I don't know how long it took, maybe a few seconds, or maybe a few hours, but he finally felt that he stepped on the ground under his feet. The cold stone slab touch comes from the bottom of the foot, and the air is filled with a damp earthy smell, which is a bit like a rotten smell. Lin Jing suddenly opened his eyes and realized that he was standing in a completely unfamiliar place. Surrounded by high-pitched stone walls, the walls are filled with runes that you can't understand, and the top is a dark dome, like a catacomb. The only light source is a few blue torches embedded in the wall, and the flames sway, reflecting the entire space. He looked down and saw that he was still wearing the plaid shirt and denim pants he wore when he worked overtime, and there was a thin layer of dust under his feet, as if no one had been here for hundreds of years. Is this a dream? Lin Jing pinched his arm, which made him gasp in pain. Not a dream. His heart began to accelerate, and his brain flew rapidly to various possibilities. Fighting? A malicious drama? Or is it a VR game experience? But he obviously didn't wear any equipment, so why did he suddenly appear in such a ghost place? At this moment, a cold sound echoed from the air, as if it was coming from all directions, and it was impossible to judge the source. Welcome to the wheel space, new player. Agent number, Lin Jing. Current link, Netherworld Mausoleum. Mission goal, find the exit, survival time limit is 72 hours. Failure penalty, death. Lin Jing was stunned for a moment. The first reaction in his brain was what the ghost, but the sound did not give him any scrutiny time. He continued to verbally, the rules of the game are as follows. 1. It is prohibited to destroy the core structure of the card. 2. Players can compete freely, and there are no means limited. 3. Each time they complete, they can rotate the life to movement wheel and get a bonus or curse. Tip: there are many connections in the tomb, so be cautious when moving. The game begins. As the voice fell, the air in front of Lin Jing suddenly twisted, and a translucent virtual projection appeared. It was a blurred figure wearing a long black robe, with a blank mask on her face, and there was no gender or expression. It slightly embarked and said in a low voice, "I am the shadow, your guide. Remember, living is the only purpose. Other questions will not be answered." Lin Jing opened her mouth, and before she could ask anything, the guy named Ding disappeared, as if he had never appeared. He stood there, his brain was in chaos. What's going on? Will space? Game? Death penalty? It sounds like a setting for some kind of infinity novel, but all of this is too real, and the odor in the air is so pungent. He took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. As a programmer, logical thinking is his best thing. No matter what kind of ghost place this is, you must first figure out the situation. He lowered his head and checked himself. He didn't wear anything except clothes, and he didn't see any mobile phone or money bag. The only extra one is a black device that runs on the wrist, like a smartphone ring, with a counter display on the screen, 71 hours 58 minutes and 23 seconds. Time limit. Lin Jing raised his eyebrows and quickly analyzed it in his brain. 72 hours means he must find the exit within 3 days, otherwise, he didn't dare to think down, slammed his head, and began to observe the surrounding environment. He is in a small stone chamber with 3 passages around him leading to different directions. There is a set of runes engraved above the entrance of each passage, like a certain mark, but I can't understand it at all. He raised a small stone on the ground with his hand and threw it towards the nearest passage, trying if there was any connection. The stone rolled for a few seconds, made a crisp sound, and then it stopped calming. It seems there is no problem, he muttered in a low voice, but he still had no idea. In this kind of place, the machine will not write it on your face and wait for you to find it. He hesitated for a moment, decided not to leave for a while, sat down against the stone wall, and tried to clarify his thoughts. But before he could come up with a reason, a sound of footsteps suddenly came from the passage far away, and it was rushed and irritating, as if someone was running. Lin Jing immediately stood up, leaning against the stone wall, staring at the direction of the sound. A few seconds later, a figure came out from the passage. It was a woman in a white coat with a scattered hair and dust on her face, looking terrible. When she saw Lin Jing, she was stunned at first, then quickly lifted a rod in her hand, slapped it out of her defensive posture, and asked in a low voice, "Who are you? Players or NPCs?" Lin Jing was stunned, and he didn't expect the other party to ask such a problem. He raised his hands, signaled that he was not vicious, and replied, "My name is Lin Jing. When I arrived at this ghost place, should he be a player? Where are you?" The woman looked him up and down for a few times, and saw that he was indeed not powerful, so she slowly put down the iron rod, but her eyes were still wearing rings. She said in a low voice, "My name is Yi Xiaoran, and I am also a player. I just came from that passage and there was something in it, and I was almost dead. You'd better not go there, because it's a trap." Lin Jing was a little nervous, and his voice was relaxed a little, and at least he met someone who could communicate. He pointed to the black device on his wrist and asked, "Do you have this too? Do you know what this is?" Yi glanced at his hand and pointed at him, "Yes, this thing is a timer, reminding you how much time you have to live. As for this place, I only know that it is called a wheel space, which is a game world. If you fail, you will die. Only by connecting with each other can you live. I don't know what the specific thing is." Her temperament was very calm, but Lin Jingzhan could feel a squishy feeling hidden in her words, as if she had experienced something bad. Without asking much, he turned around and said, "Then what did you run away? What's behind?" Yi Zhao's face suddenly darkened and said in a low voice, "It's not something, it's a man. A guy named Bloodblade killed 2 of our team and was chasing me now. He doesn't tell any rules, pure as a crazy person. You'd better not meet him." "Bloodblade?" Lin Jing raised his eyebrows. This name doesn't sound like a good person. He was about to ask for details, but a low smile suddenly came from the passage far away, as if he was deliberately hearing it, with a sense of chillingness. "After all, I ran very fast. Unfortunately, this place is so big, where can you hide?" A rough man's voice came from the depths of the passage, and every word seemed to be struck on a human brain, with unconcealed murder. Ye's face changed and he said to Lin Jing in a low voice, "It's him, go quickly. This guy doesn't make any sense, kill him if you see him." After she said that, she turned around and ran towards another passage, and her movements were brisk and neat, as if she had been engaging in this kind of escape rhythm for a long time. Lin Jing's heartbeat accelerated sharply, and his brain quickly weighed his power. He just arrived here alone and knew nothing, so a single gun was definitely not an option. "Follow Yi ran, at least you can understand the situation more." So he gritted his teeth and quickly followed, and the 2 of them rushed into another passage, one in front and the other behind. The light in the passage is darker, and some broken carvings can be seen on the stone walls on both sides, such as the pattern of some ancient myth. Lin Jing ran around to observe and found that the stone slabs on some places on the ground were of different colors, as if they were hiding some machines. He immediately shouted, "Be careful not to step on the wrong place." Yi Xiao suddenly looked back at him, and his pace slowed down a little. The 2 ran about a few hundred meters, the passage began to become narrower and the air became increasingly weak. Lin Jing felt like cotton was stuffed in her lungs, and she complained to her. Lin Jing ran and asked, "Who is the blood blade you just said? Why do you want to chase you?" Yi was gasping for a moment, with a burst of anger in his language. He is a change, and he thinks killing people is more interesting than communicating. Many players here are like him, treating others as tools or musicians. You'd better not trust anyone, and I'm no exception. Lin Qing heard it and her heart sank. It's not that he hasn't seen the dark side, but this bottomless behavior still makes him a little unsuitable. He pointed at the head, didn't say anything, and ran forward with Yi carefully. After running for another period, the passage finally reached the end, and there was a huge round stone temple in front of it. There is a stone platform in the center of the hall, with an old blue copper box on it, and the walls around it are filled with complex runes, scattering a strange breath. Lin Jing could see at a glance that this place was definitely not simple, and it might be the key to the common one. But before he could take a closer look, Yi suddenly stopped and said in a low voice, "Be careful, someone is coming." Lin Jing looked through her video and saw only a tall man walking in at another entrance to the stone hall. He was wearing a broken battle suit, covered in blood, and was carrying a huge knife in his hand, with blood dripping on the blade. He had a sick smile on his face, his eyes seemed to be looking at a pet. When he swept over Lin Jing and Yi, the corners of his mouth became bigger. There is another little snail." He licked the blood on the blade, and his voice was filled with a sound. "This is even more interesting. Who are you going to die first?" Lin Jing's heart beat sharply and his brain quickly analyzed the situation in front of him. This man should be the blood blade that Yi Xiaoran said. Judging from his stance, it doesn't seem like a type that can be reasoned at all. Head-on fight is definitely not a match. The only way is to delay time and find an opportunity to take it off. He took a deep breath and opened his mouth firmly. "Bloodblade, right? We don't have to fight, we are all trying to connect. Why waste energy on this matter?" Bloodblade heard it and laughed, as if he heard some funny joke. He pointed at Lin Jing with a knife, his language was full of ridicule. "Common? Little crazy, do you think this place is a family? This is a game, and there must be a happy one in the game. If you don't kill a few people, how can you be considered playing?" Lin Jing raised his eyebrows and said nothing more. He knew that it was useless to talk to such people. He glanced quietly around and tried to find a way to escape, but the exit of the stone hall was blocked. The only hope was the stone platform in the center. Maybe there is some thread in that blue copper box that can help them turn the situation around. Yi Xiao seemed to have realized this and said to Lin Jing in a low voice, "I'll hold him up, you go and see that box. Hurry!" Lin Jing pointed at the head, and knew in his heart that this was the only way at present. He took advantage of the fact that Bloodblade was not moving, and quickly rushed towards the stone platform. Yi immediately put on the iron rod and put out the battle posture to try to attract Bloodblade's attention. Bloodblade saw the statue, sneered, and walked towards Yi with a knife, as if he didn't take her seriously at all. His pace was not fast, but every step was filled with a sense of pressure, as if he could explode at any time. Lin Jing ran to the stone platform and quickly checked the green copper box. The surface of the box is engraved with detailed patterns, like a certain password lock, and there is a line of small words next to it, using words that he cannot understand. He raised his eyebrows and his brain turned quickly, trying to find out the rules. As a programmer, cracking logic problems is his best job, but the time is too tight at the moment, and he can't calm down. Behind him, Yi Ji and Bloodblade had already fought. The sound of the collision between the iron rod and the knife was extremely harsh. Although Yi Xiao was good at it, he was obviously not the opponent of Bloodblade. After a few moves, he fell into a downward trend. Lin Jing bit his teeth tightly, knowing that he had to tighten the time, otherwise both of them would be over. He took a deep breath, carefully studied the traces on the box, and tried to find a breakthrough. At the same time, Bloodblade's smile rose again, carrying a burst of excitement. "Don't sting, little snails, the game just started." Lin Jing's fingers slid between the traces on the blue copper box, and his heartbeat was as fast as if it was about to pop out of his chest. The sound of the fight between the leaves and the blood blade became more and more intense, and the sound of the iron rod and the knife colliding seemed to hit his brain directly, making him unable to concentrate at all. He clenched his teeth and forced himself to focus on the box. These patterns seem confusing, but as a programmer, he knows that no matter how complicated things are, they can be read. The problem is that he only had a few minutes, or even a few seconds, to crack this ghost thing. Hurry! Ye's voice came from afar, carrying a hurricane in fatigue. Lin Jing glanced back and saw that she had been forced into the corner of the stone hall by a blood blade. The iron rod was almost unable to hold it, and there was a blood mark on her arm. The blood blade was a light face, and the knife was swung casually, like a cat teasing a mouse, without using all its strength at all. What's the hurry? Let's play slowly. Blood Bien grinned, his eyes filled with anxiety. He deliberately slowed down his movements, as if he was enjoying this stressful process. Lin Qing's heart sank, knowing that if they don't find a solution, they all have to explain it here. He turned around, stared at the blue copper box, and analyzed quickly in his brain. There are 9 groups of patterns, each group has different shapes, but there seems to be some kind of character in the middle. He suddenly flashed his spirit and remembered the stone wall runes he saw when he entered the tomb. Those runes also had similar corresponding structures. Is it difficult to understand how this box is unlocked in the design of the mausoleum? He quickly recalled the 3 rune marks at the entrance of the stone chamber, one of which was exactly similar to the pattern in the center of the box. He closed his eyes, tried to recreate the shape of the rune in his brain, and then compared it with his fingers on the box. Sure enough, when his finger pressed into a groove, the box sounded a slight click sound, as if a certain machine was touched. It's done! Lin Jing was shocked and hurriedly continued to press the other corresponding grooves. Every time you press it, the box sounds like an internal horn is turning. When he pressed the last groove, the box suddenly popped up, and a cold breath overflowed from it, making him unable to help but hit the cold. He carefully lifted the box and saw a black crystal lying inside, with a dark blue light flowing on the surface, like a certain energy core. There is also a broken sheepskin paper next to it, with a passage written in crooked words: "Those who hold crystals can open the door of the tomb, but they must bear the wheel's trial. Be cautious in making decisions." Testing for wheel plate? Lin Jing raised his eyebrows, feeling a bad premonition in his heart. But now there was no time to think about it. He grabbed the crystal and sheepskin paper, turned around and shouted at Yi, "I found something, hold it." Yi suddenly heard his voice, and he reluctantly slammed the blood blade, gritted his teeth and replied, "Go away. Don't worry about me." Her voice was already a little sandy, and it was obviously almost limitless. Lin Jing hesitated for a second, but quickly bit her teeth and rushed to another exit of the stone hall. He knew that staying would only cost both people a life, and his only hope was to find the exit of the mausoleum, or use this crystal to do something. He ran around and glanced back, and the blood blade's eyes were locked on him, and a sneer came out of the corner of his mouth. Want to run? Little crazy, the game is not so simple. Bloodblade said in a low voice, then kicked Yi off, dragging his knife and chasing Lin Jing. His speed was amazing, and he narrowed the distance in a few steps, and the blade scraped a harsh sound on the stone wall. Lin Jing's heartbeat was almost stopped, and there was only one thought in her brain: run. He entered another passage, and the stone slabs under his feet kept making strange noises, as if they would touch the generator at any time. He didn't dare to stop or turn around, so he could only look straight at choosing the route. The passage was twisting and rolling, the air became more and more tidier, and water droplets began to flow out from the stone wall at the top, as if entering a deeper place in the tomb. After running for about a few minutes, he finally saw a huge stone door appearing in front of him, with a circular groove embedded in the door, which just matched the crystal in his hand. He gasped, rushed to the door and tried to plug the crystal into the groove. Sure enough, as soon as the crystal stone was put in, a low bird appeared on the stone door, sliding open to both sides. Behind the door is a wider space, and in the center is a huge sacrificial fortress. On the sacrificial fortress is floating, spiraling and emitting a strange light. The walls around are full of twisted patterns, like some ancient genre records. Lin Jing was stunned for a moment, and suddenly remembered the words on the sheepskin paper in her brain, testing the wheel. Before he could react, the Bloodblade's footsteps were heard in the passage behind him, heavy and rapid. He turned around and saw that the Bloodblade had appeared in the channel as soon as he could see, and there was still blood on the knife, and the smile on his face became more and more intense. Running very fast, little slut. Bloodblade licked his lips and walked closer, but there is no exit here. Hand over what you have in your hand, maybe I can make you die happily. Lin Jing took a few steps back and his brain flew fast. He knew that fighting hard was definitely not the opponent, but there was no other way to go now. He glanced at the wheel on the fort, and suddenly had a big thought in his heart. Since this thing is called plate test, it may help him take it off. He took a deep breath, pretending to shake his voice in fear. Okay, I'll give you, don't kill me, he said, as he pretended to put his hand in his pocket, actually quickly rushed towards the fort, and reached out to touch the floating wheel. The moment the wheel was touched, a dazzling white light came out, and the entire space began to vibrate violently. Bloodblade was stunned for a moment, and immediately roared, "You are looking for death." He lifted his sword and rushed over, but before he got close, he was swept open by an invisible force and fell heavily on the stone wall. At the same time, a cold voice sounded in Lin Jing's ears, as if he was talking directly in his brain. The wheel disc test is started. The player Lin Jing is ready to accept the decision of fate. The reward or curse is determined by the wheel disc. Lin Jing's eyes flashed, and he saw that the wheel began to rotate wildly, with various symbols appearing on it, some of which were weapon patterns, some skeletons, and some of which were completely incomprehensible. The wheel finally stopped and pointed at a symbol flashing green, like a pattern of a certain medicine bottle. The voice sounded again, "Trial results, rewards, breath of life. Effect, restore all injuries and be immune to fatal injuries once in the next 24 hours. The reward has taken effect." As the voice fell, Lin Jing felt a warm current spread from her chest, and the fatigue and soreness in her body disappeared in an instant, and even the ankles that she twisted while running recovered as before. He looked down and saw that there was a green invert on the black device screen on his wrist, 23 hours 59 minutes and 59 seconds. This. Lin Jing was stunned for a moment, and immediately responded. This prize was simply a life-saving straw. He turned to look at the Bloodblade and found that the other party had climbed up from the ground, his face as if it could drip out of water. Roll bonus? It's a bit meaningful. Bloodblade sneered and held the knife tightly. But, even if you have a bonus, you're just a little snail. Come on, let me see how long you can hold it. Lin Jing felt nervous and knew that this guy would not let him go easily. But with this 24-hour immune effect, he at least doesn't have to worry about being killed in one blow. He quickly glanced around and found that there was a hidden passage behind the fort, saying that it might lead to the exit. He pretended to retreat in fear, and actually moved quietly towards the passage, and deliberately asked, "Aren't you very bad? Why can't even a newcomer handle it?" The Bloodblade was aroused by this, and her face became even more difficult to see. She roared and knocked over. Lin Jing took advantage of the opportunity to turn around and tried his best to penetrate the passage, and his footsteps were reverberating in the narrow space. Behind him, the Bloodblade's anger became more and more distant, but Lin Jing knew that this guy would never stop there. The light in the passage was almost zero, so he could only drop the stone wall and prayed silently in his heart that he would not encounter any connection again. Fortunately, this road seemed to be safe. After running for about 10 minutes, a faint light finally appeared in front of me. He accelerated his pace and rushed to the light source, and found that it was a half-open stone door, and outside it was a deserted scene of wasteland, as if it was directed from the tomb to another world. Lin Jing was stunned for a moment, and suddenly remembered the rules he heard when he entered the wheel space. Every time he passed the junction, he could enter the next junction. He looked down at the device on his wrist, and the counter count on the screen had turned into mission completion, and then a new line of text popped up. Next link, survival in the wasteland. Survival time limit, 96 hours. Game, start. Come again? Lin Jing couldn't help but complain in a low voice, but his voice was relaxed. At least, he survived the first party. He turned around and glanced at the passage behind him, and confirmed that the blood blade had not caught up with him, so he carefully walked out of the stone gate and stepped into this strange wasteland. The outside world is like a scene after the end of the world. The sky is gray and the ground is filled with cracks and broken buildings. There is a burnt smell in the air. Far away, several vague figures moved around the ruins, like other players, and might be something dangerous. Lin Jing raised his eyebrows, quickly found a broken corner of the wall and squatted down, trying to hide his own tracks. At this moment, he heard a sound of footsteps coming from afar, light and rapid, as if someone was approaching. He felt tight in his heart, holding the crystal in his hand tightly, ready to be right at any time. A few seconds later, a familiar figure walked out from the ruins. It was Yi Xiaoran. She looked even more wolfish than before, and her clothes were covered in blood and dust, but her eyes were still cold and stable. When she saw Lin Jing, she was stunned at first, and then asked in a low voice, "How did you survive?" Lin Jing smiled bitterly and briefly explained the matter of just trying to do it. Yi finished listening and was silent for a few seconds before pointing out, "The wheel system is indeed the core of this game. Every time you pass, there will be a chance to rotate. However, the probability of rewards and curse is similar. If the weather is not good, you may die directly." What a pit. Lin Jing couldn't help but complain, but he also understood in his heart that this place was not a good person. He looked at Yi Ran and asked, "What about you? Why did you lose yourself?" Yi Xiao lowered his head and glanced at his arm, which was covered with a piece of rag, hiding blood. She said calmly, "After you were leading the blood blade away, I looked for a chance to run away. There are many passages here, and it took me a few circles to find the exit. However, he will definitely catch up, and we have to seize the time." Lin Jing points the head and starts to count the next step in his brain. He knew that single fight wouldn't work in this ghost place at all. Although Yi Xiao said he didn't trust anyone, at least it seemed that he was a partner for cooperation at the moment. He said in a deep voice, "Then let's work together first. This link is to survive in the wasteland, and it probably won't be simple. Two people are stronger than one." Yi Xiao glanced at him, but didn't object, but just pointed at the head and said, "Okay, but there's a little, don't drag your back legs. I don't like being tired." Lin Jing said with a smile and smiled, "Don't worry, I don't want to die here." The two reached a temporary cooperation and began to look for traces in the wasteland. This area is vast and there are broken buildings and traps everywhere. Occasionally, you can hear roars coming from afar, like some kind of varied creature. Lin Jing felt his observation and discovered some hidden resources, such as a few bottles of clean water and a pack of compressed milk hidden in an old warehouse. Yi Xiao was responsible for the warning, and her sudden and sensitive vision had discovered potential dangers several times. Just as they searched for the third hour, the sky suddenly darkened, and a deep sound of storm came from afar, as if the storm was about to come. Lin Jing raised his eyebrows and said in a low voice, "The environment here is changing too fast, so we have to find a place to hide." Yi suddenly pointed at a semi-collapsed factory building nowhere. "It looks solid then, go." The two people quickly ran towards the factory, but before they reached the door, the ground suddenly shook violently, like an earthquake. Lin Jing rushed around and almost fell down. When he turned around, he saw that the sand from the far away from the ground was rolled up, forming a huge whirlpool, like a monster about to break out of the ground. What kind of ghost thing? He couldn't help but whisper, and the pressure in his heart instantly rose. Yi Ji's face became solemn, and he said in a low voice, "One of the difficulties in surviving the wasteland is the disaster of the environment. Looking at this framework, it may be a sandstorm or a different creature. We have to go in quickly, otherwise it will be finished if you are rolled in." Lin Jing tied her teeth and followed her into the factory, quickly closing the broken iron door. Just as the door was closed, the sound outside became even more violent, as if countless beasts were roaring. Although the interior of the factory is broken, it can at least squeeze out a blow of sand. The two found a corner to sit down, and gasped. At this moment, the device on Lin Jing's wrist suddenly lit up, and a new line of text popped up on the screen: Submarine Mission Touch, Protect Wasteland Trust. Mission Goal, Protect Trust and Sandstorms from being destroyed, lasting time, 12 hours. Complete the bonus, the wheel rotation chance will be once. Failure penalty, 24 hours of survival time are deducted. Trust? Lin Jing was stunned for a moment, and immediately noticed that there was a small device with faint red light in the center of the factory, like a certain signal tower. He turned his head and looked at Yi Sunan and asked in a low voice, "Is this a benefactor? Do we have to keep it?" Yi was a little bit, his face was not very good, it seems. "There must be something in the sandstorm that will destroy this thing, we have to prepare it. This task is not simple." Lin Jing took a deep breath and knew that the next 12 hours would not be relaxed. But he also understands that completing tasks may mean additional survival opportunities. He stood up and began to check the environment inside the factory, try to find useful anti-war tools, and he soon began to organize the resources in his hands and prepare for the upcoming challenge. The sound outside was getting closer and closer, and the sand slapped the iron door, making a harsh sound. Lin Jing felt nervous and flew in his brain to count various possibilities. He knew that this sandstorm was just the beginning of survival in the wasteland, and the real danger might be at the back. Lin Jing leaned against the corner of the factory's old wall, holding a tube rolling from the ruins in his hand, staring at the sign of the weak red light in the center. The sandstorm outside has been going on for several hours, the sound of roaring like wild animals, and the iron door squeaks by the sand, which may be blown open at any time. Yi was squatting beside him, holding a broken dagger found from the wasteland warehouse in her hand. Her face was as cold as if nothing had happened, but there was a faint feeling in her eyes. "How long does this sandstorm last?" Lin Jing asked in a low voice, and the sound was almost invisible by the wind. The device on his wrist showed the branch mission for 8 hours, and the power strips of the credentials were still full, but who knew what would happen next? He suddenly glanced out the window, the sand covered the sky and the sun, and he couldn't see the situation away clearly. She replied in a low voice, "I don't know, but there is definitely more than wind in the sandstorm. The environmental disasters of the wasteland are often just appetizers, and 80% of the things will come and get chaotic at the back." Lin Jing was a little bit, and I had a premonition in my heart. They have already set up some simple defenses in the factory, such as blocking several hold windows with broken iron plates, and piled up some heavy objects to block the barriers around the signs. But he really had no idea whether these things could be used. He took a deep breath and tried to calm himself down, and his brain began to recall the kinds of things he had walked along the way. From the Netherworld Mausoleum to survival in the wasteland, to the previous few checkpoints, he and Yi Xiaoran worked together and survived to the present. Every level is like playing life, from the link trap to the different monsters, to the crazy players like Bloodblade, they can kill their lives anytime. But the more I walked behind, the more Lin Jing felt that the space in this wheel was not simple. The threads of each level, the words of the shadows, and even the prizes and curses of the wheel system, are like pointing to a bigger secret. "What are you thinking?" Ye's voice suddenly interrupted his thoughts. She glanced at him, her voice calmly, "It's all this time, don't be distracted." Lin Jing smiled bitterly and shook his head, "It's nothing, I just think this place is getting more and more evil." "Do you think the wheel space is really fucked?" "It's really like the saying goes. You can get back to reality by just connecting it, and what kind of power can you get?" Yi suddenly remained silent for a while, looked down at the dagger in his hand, and his voice was low, "I don't know, nor do I want to know. I only know that living is the first priority. Others, let's talk about it after you turn it off." Her words made Lin Jing's heart sink. He knew Yi had his own story, and although she had never mentioned it actively, he could feel that she knew much more about the wheel space than it was on the surface. But he didn't ask much, and it wasn't the time to chat now. At this moment, a loud noise suddenly came from the iron gate, as if it was hit hard by some heavy object. Lin Jing and Yi Xiao stood up at the same time, holding the weapon in their hands tightly, staring at the door. In the sound of the sandstorm, you can hear a low roar, like a creature approaching. "Hear you?" Yi Shao suddenly said in a low voice, without any panic in his language. She quickly moved to the next to the sign, found a favorable position to squat down, ready to be right at any time. Lin Jing also moved to the side of the iron door and looked out through the door. "The sand is so vague, but I can see a few huge black shadows moving in the wind and sand, distorted, like a human but not a human, and there seems to be some kind of spike on its body." He felt a tight heart in his heart and said to Yi quietly, "It's a different creature, it's not small, but there are 3 or 4. Yi was a little bit, and said in a deep voice, "Keep your trust and don't let them get closer. How long can you drag it?" As the voice fell, the iron door was hit hard again. This time the force was even stronger, and the iron plate on the door was directly concave. Lin Jing tied his teeth tightly, used the iron tube to keep it on the door, and tried to get a little more time. But those creatures were too powerful. After a few hits, the chain of the iron door began to move loosely and was about to be knocked open. "No, I can't hold it anymore." Lin Jing growled and turned to look at Yi Shaoran. "Is there any way to do it?" Yi Shao quickly glanced at the inside of the factory, pointed to a broken arm on the ceiling and said, "That one is useful. Cut off the snails, hang them on the door, and then drag them a little more. I'll leave them open, hurry up." Lin Jing pointed his head, quickly pulled under the boom, climbed up and cut the veil. Although the road was old, it was still true. He hurried 3 or 2 at the handle of the iron door, and hung several iron buckets on the other end, barely increasing some resistance. At the same time, he had just pushed to another window, deliberately knocking on the iron plate, making a huge sound, trying to attract the attention of those creatures. Her strategy worked, and the force of the collision weakened a little, and the roar began to move towards the window. Lin Jing took the opportunity to return to the next to the letter and said in a low voice, "It's done, but it won't take long. We have to think of a way to go." He didn't say anything, but just clicked a little, and his eyes were determined. She suddenly took out a small bottle of liquid from her pocket, like some kind of chemical medicine, and told Lin Jing, "This is what I found in the wasteland warehouse before. It should be a burning agent. If the situation is wrong, use this to burn them and you can fight for some time." Lin Jing took the small bottle and knew in his heart that this thing was probably for life. He pointed at the head. Without saying much, the two continued to stand by the signs, waiting for the next wave of attacks. Sure enough, after a few minutes, the migratory creatures seemed to have discovered that the static at the window was fake, and gathered again in front of the iron door. This time their attack became more violent, and the iron gate was finally knocked open under a heavy blow, and the sand and several huge shadows rushed in. Lin Jing felt a little sad when he saw those things at first sight. It was not an ordinary creature at all. Its body looked like a mixture of humans and stings, with long and sharp thorns, long limbs but shocking. There were no eyes on the face, only a big cracked mouth, full of sharp teeth. As soon as they rushed in, they headed straight for the letter, and their roars made people's ears numb. "Go!" Yi Shao sniffed softly, and the first one was thrust up, and the dagger in his hand stabbed at the nearest monster. The monster was in pain and let out a sharp scream, turning toward her. Lin Jing didn't hesitate either, so he lifted the iron tube and slammed it hard on the leg of another monster, trying to reduce its speed. But the skin of these things was too thick, and the iron pipe was like hitting on a rock, which made Lin Jing's hands numb. The monster turned over and bit him with a big mouth. He hit on one side, but his clothes were still broken by a sharp piercing. "Damn, it's too hard." Lin Jing replied in a low voice, quickly retreated, and quickly calculating the countermeasures in his brain. "It is definitely not possible to fight hard, and you must use some other method." He glanced at the burner in his hand, gritted his teeth, and shouted to the leaves, "Turn them to the corner, I'll come and fire." Yi immediately agreed and ran to a corner of the factory, knocking on the iron plate, making a huge sound. The monsters were indeed attracted and chased her. Lin Jing took the opportunity to rush to the mailbox, smeared the burner on the path the monster passed, and then took out a piece of flint from his pocket. "This was something I had caught in the wasteland before, but I didn't expect it to be put on the use site. He wiped hard, and the sparks burst out, the burner was instantly ignited, and the fire spread rapidly. The monsters were surrounded by fire, screaming harshly, and their actions became extremely reckless. Lin Jing was happy, but he didn't relax his vigilance, because although the fire could hold them at a time, it was impossible to burn these monsters to death. "Return," he shouted to Yi very much, and the two quickly returned to the letter and were ready to welcome the next wave of attacks. Sure enough, the fire began to weaken after a few minutes. Although the monsters were burned black, they still did not die and continued to crawl towards Shintu. Lin Jing and Yi were almost back to back, guarding the signs, and the weapons in their hands were already a little uneasy. Time passed by minute by second, and the device on the wrist showed that the task was still 4 hours, but their physical strength was almost at an extreme limit. At this moment, a low smile suddenly came from far away, and Lin Jing's heart was so familiar that it made him sink. "Yeah, little zombies, are you still alive?" The voice of the blood blade came from the entrance of the factory. He dragged the huge knife and covered in sand. He still had the sick smile on his face. "It seems you have fun. Do you want me to add some materials?" Lin Jing bit his teeth tightly, and his heart was so confused that this guy couldn't dissipate his soul. He said to Yi in a low voice, "Thank you this guy to me, you keep your promise." Yi was a little bit late, and didn't say much, he was dedicated to dealing with those monsters. Lin Jing turned around and faced with a blood blade, and his brain quickly calculated the countermeasures. He knew that blood blade was more difficult to deal with than those monsters, but there was no other choice at the moment. "Bloodblade, is it interesting to have nothing to do?" Lin Jing deliberately slowed down his temper and tried to delay time. "We are all fighting hard in this place. You killed us. What good will it do for you?" Bloodblade grinned and licked the blade. "What's the good thing? Isn't the game just a picture of a song? Kill you, my song." After saying that, he didn't say anything anymore and just slammed the knife. Lin Jing gritted his teeth and lifted the iron tube to latches, but the force was not of the same level as the scale. The iron tube was cut off directly, and he was shocked and took a few steps back and almost fell down. "That's all?" Blood Bien sneered, and the sword pointed directly at Lin Jing's neck. At this moment, Lin Jing suddenly took out the crystal stones he had obtained from his wheels from his pocket and smashed them hard towards the blood blade. The crystal stone, carrying a dark blue light, hit the blood blade, emitted an invisible force, which shook him back a few meters. "What kind of ghost thing is this?" Bloodblade was stunned for a moment, and his face became even darker. "Little celestial, it's a little bit like that." Lin Jing did not reply, and took advantage of the empty file to quickly retreat and analyzed quickly in his brain. He knew that the power of crystal was limited, and that just now it was probably the last time. The only hope is to drag the task to the end or find a chance to counterattack. As time passed, the battles within the factory became more and more intense. Yi Xiao insisted on the trust, but the monsters seemed to be fighting harder and harder, and there was no intention of regressing. The blood blade is like an immortal monster. No matter how Lin Jing hides, he can quickly catch up with him. The knife is wiping his body again and again, leaving blood marks. Just when Lin Jing was about to get rid of it, a crisp reminder sound suddenly came out of the device on his wrist, and a line of words popped up on the screen: "The branch mission is completed. Award, there will be a chance to rotate the wheel once. Please go to the safe area and change it." "It's done." Lin Jing was shocked in a low voice, and turned his head and shouted to Yi, "The mission is over, withdraw." Yi suddenly pointed and quickly retreated to his side. The two of them took advantage of the gap between the monster and the blood blade and rushed towards the back door of the factory. Although the door was broken, the road to the outside was still clear. Bloodblade saw them running, and sneered, and did not rush to chase them, but said in a low voice, "Run, little boys, the game is still long." Lin Jing ignored him, and Yi soon rushed out of the factory and ran towards the ruins far away. They ran for about half an hour, and finally found a relatively safe old building and hid in. The two sat down against the wall, gasping for breath, covered in blood and sand. It's been calculated. Lin Jing said in a low voice. The sound was full of fatigue. He looked down at the device, and the mainline mission of surviving Wasteland was still 48 hours on the screen, but at least he could catch his breath now. He didn't say anything, just silently checked his wounds. After a while, she suddenly opened her mouth. The wheel is rotating, you go. I'll keep it. Lin Jing clicked the head, walked aside, and activated the wheel system on the device. The virtual wheel appeared in front of him again, spiraling around, and there were still various symbols on it, some like prizes, and some like curses. He took a deep breath, pressed the rotation key, and the wheel began to turn wildly. Finally, the fingers stopped on a symbol with golden light, and the sound echoed again. Test result, reward, Eye of Wisdom. Effect, you can sense some rules of the next level in advance, and the duration, permanent. The reward has taken effect. Lin Jing was stunned for a moment and was immediately delighted. Although this prize is not as direct as the breath of life, it is undoubtedly a huge advantage to be able to know the rules in advance. He turned his head to Yi Xiao. This time the weather was good and he got a good thing. Yi was a little bit late and didn't say much, just a low voice reminder, don't be too excited too early, and the survival of the wasteland is not over yet. Next, there may be something more cumbersome. Her words made Lin Jing's heart sink, but he also knew that now was not a time to relax. They handled the wound briefly and prepared to continue exploring the wasteland and find the connections. As time goes by, the checkpoints for survival in the wasteland gradually approach the end of the day. Lin Jing and Yi Xiao had countless life and death tests in the next few days, from the attack of different creatures to the invasion of environmental disasters, and even betrayed by other players. But with Lin Jing's logical analysis and Ye's quiet calmness, they turned into a barbarism again and again, and finally found a mutual exit at the last moment. However, the moment they stepped into the exit, Lin Jing suddenly felt a strong dizzy, as if the whole world was twisting. When he came back to his senses, he realized that he was standing in a brand new space. This was not any specific link, but a virtual world purely composed of codes, surrounded by countless streams of flow, like the inside of a certain core system. This is... Lin Jing was stunned for a moment, and immediately responded. This may be the ultimate connection in the wheel space, the realm of the inner demon. He turned to look at Yi Ran and found that her face was unusually solemn, as if he had known that he would come here for a long time. Be careful, this link is not simple. Yi Xiao said in a low voice, with a complex emotion flashing in his eyes. In the realm of the inner demon, what is tested is not only wisdom and courage, but also your heart. Lin Jing pointed at the head, and suddenly the prompt sound of the Eye of Wisdom suddenly appeared in his brain. The realm of the demon, facing the deepest fear in the heart, you can only connect to it if you crack the core code. Failure, permanently trapped in the wheel space. I'm afraid. Lin Jing murmured in a low voice, feeling a bad premonition in his heart. But he didn't have time to think about it because the data flow around suddenly began to condense, forming a huge virtual projection that was the shadow. Lin Jing, Yi Yan, welcome to the final test. Ying's voice was low and cold, and the eyes under the mask seemed to have a slight scent. You have gone very far, but this is just the beginning. The realm of the inner demon will determine your fate. Lin Jing took a deep breath, clamped his fists tightly, and analyzed quickly in his brain. He knew that this relationship would be his biggest challenge with Yi Xiao, but he also understood that only through this relationship can the ultimate secret of the wheel space be revealed. Come on, he said softly, his eyes filled with determination. No matter what it is, I will not retreat.